we are going to begin tonight. We have lots packed into one night, so if you missed parent night in the spring, don't worry, we're going to try and recap some of that and then move on to the next part. Our first guest tonight, though, is Rick Morton from Johnston's, and he's going to talk to you about graduation. So, Rick.
All right, thank you. Have you guys ever had like a perfect day? No? Okay. So my youngest is 28, his name is John, and we were in San Diego when we were raising our kids when we were younger. We would love to go to this beach. It was La Jolla Shores. If you're familiar with San Diego, it is an incredible beach. And we used to go there almost every weekend. And we would go there on the weekends. My son loved it because it had the best rocket ship toy playground you could imagine. And so this particular trip to the beach, it was sunny, it was perfect. We got a great spot, had a bonfire. My brother and his wife and his 2 kids are visiting from Washington. And we ended up having to take 2 vehicles that day, but it was just one of those perfect days. Looking back, you could hear the ocean, deep breaths, it was just amazing. And so we get to the end of the day, we pack up our vehicles, and we're heading home. We finally got home. My wife was the first one to walk in the door, and the telephone rang. And her face went from a calm to a panic when she heard the words, "Mom, this is Jonathan. You left me at the beach." Parent of the year. I left my 6-year-old son at a beach a half hour from my house at 10 o'clock at night. Yeah. So we immediately got in the car. I broke every speed limit getting back. There was 2 wonderful San Diego State college girls who had found him, gave him a quarter to call our house. And you know, it's crazy. To this day, when you give him a hug, he doesn't want to let go. He's, and he's doing fine. In fact, my son, he's actually working with me now. He was a master tech for BMW for many years, and he decided to join the family business. And he's going to be speaking to your seniors tomorrow. So I'm really excited that my son is just growing up. It's just crazy how time flies by. And so for those of you who have seniors, how many this is your very first senior graduate? If you can raise your hands. Okay. All right. Wow, we have a lot of first time. And then how many is this like your second senior? Raise your hand. Okay, look at those people. Keep your hands up. Look at them. Go ask them how it was done. It's crazy. So I want to remind you that even though your senior looks like an adult, they still need to be told how much you love them and honor them. So I just, every day my adult children literally want to hear, "I'm proud of you." And I have 34, 31, and 28. So they just never grow up. But anyway, my wife and I, we own the local Johnston's franchise, and we love celebrating seniors. So my job is to make sure that all of the students that are graduating look perfect on graduation day. So believe it or not, that planning starts now, because all of our caps and gowns are custom made for each of your students. And so the gown, the whole graduation outfit's only $37, so it's really affordable. But we also have a ton of other stuff. I have catalogs up front. You can grab on your way out, or if you happen to pass them out. So there's all kinds of ways that Johnston's loves to give you to celebrate. And so what I'm doing is just trying to make it easy. For those of you who want to get a head start and place your order early, what I'm going to do is give a couple incentives. There's a bunch of promotions that are explained on this flyer up here. Your students will hear it in the morning, and they will take information back with them tomorrow as well. So make sure to ask them, "Hey, where's that Johnston's packet?" Because it'll have the details of all of the promotions. One that I know you like is that if you order by next Friday, I'm going to pay for the shipping. So that helps. Every little penny helps. And so, and then the price of the gown stays at $37 all the way until December 15th. Johnston's, as a franchise owner, I have to give them my order all together, and so they give me that price. Normally it's $15 higher, but if you get your gown order in by December 15th, you'll get in with the group order and you'll get the better price. So cap, gown, tassel, it's going to be beautiful. We do the delivery in the spring, so it's usually at the end of April or March or somewhere around there. And then we also deliver all the graduation announcements. Grab that packet from your student tomorrow. I didn't bring any tonight. I'm sorry I ran out. But we put a sample of the beautiful Bellman custom announcement in there with your school's crest, and it's absolutely stunning. But there'll be a lot of questions you have. All my contact information is there. You can have some business cards up there. But I just want to say congratulations, having a senior. Thank you for celebrating your students all year. It's going to be exciting. Hold on tight. But thank you very much. And that's all I have for tonight. So thank you. Have a great night.
Okay, and our first guest speaker is Hillary Powell. She's the director. Some of you may have remembered Melody Ferguson. I don't know if you've ever met her, but Hillary is the But from PLU, and she's going to talk to you about like some of the changes in the admissions landscape and what you guys need to know for what's happening this year.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. Definitely not the new Melody. She is still the best. She's still there. She's now just running the whole show. So my name is Hillary Powell. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Admission. I've been in the college admission world for about 10 years. So I've had the pleasure of kind of seeing how this world has changed, especially over the last 3-4 years as we have entered into kind of post-COVID, all the changes that have happened with optional things and what that really means. So we'll kind of jump into some of those and talk through how you can support your students as well and the role that you have in this process and how we do that on the admissions side. So this is just a quick reminder that the application your student turns in is a real treat for us to be able to read. So that means we need generally 5 things, and this is pretty standard across all colleges. So we need a transcript. Most of the time it needs to be official from the high school. Your student can request that. There are some that will allow self-reported grades or self-submitted transcripts. So the college website will tell you exactly how you need to do that, and oftentimes it's in the Common App as well, which is how a majority of schools do the Common Application for applying. A recommendation, the essay, the application itself, and test scores. So those are normally the 5 components that are needed. So we'll kind of jump into what all of those mean. But before we do that, one of the questions I get a lot of the time is, what does interest look like and how does that play into the college admission process? So one is applying early does matter. A lot of us in the college landscape have information that we are giving out to our applicants. So the earlier you get your student to apply, the earlier you start to get that information and can really start to make that decision of whether it's going to be a school that you choose in the spring or not. So applying early does matter. It also normally means that you're hearing back a little bit earlier from some schools or have less stress around that like Thanksgiving, Christmas time, right? We want to be able to enjoy the holidays as much as possible. Another one is visit campus. I'm assuming most of you have been on a college visit of some sort. But this is really important as well. So not only visiting the physical campuses, but listening to the webinars, being able to jump in on academic information sessions, seeing kind of what those top schools are offering, because that can also show interest, right, what your student attends or shows up to. There's also a lot of schools, PLU as an example, where there's visit scholarships being offered. I would say this normally happens more at private institutions, where you're able to go and do a visit and then a scholarship will be granted because the campus visit experience is one of the most important part of the process of choosing a college. So that's why a lot of us have a scholarship available to that, because we believe it's kind of one of the top things in the college decision-making process. Another one, and this is just personal, respond to the admission counselors. We are real people who are trying to help your kids through the process. So also tell this to your children and students as well, is that the admission counselors, our whole role is to help the student and you all as the family members through the admission process on the college side, right? So for each of us, you have someone who is assigned to you, whether that's via the high school, the county, the state. So check the admission websites for the schools that your students are applying to. More often than not, we're going to be emailing and or texting, and we are real people, I promise. My favorite is some of the responses I get from my initial text, and I'm like, nope, real person here, promise. Help us get to know you, so I think this is a really big part. This is a two-way street, right? We're admission counselors or admission professionals, and being able to help you decide not only if, you know, the school is right for your student and you as a family, but if on our side, if your student is right for our school, right? We want to make sure that a student is at the right fit college. So helping us get to know you as a family and as a student is not oversharing or overstepping. It often allows us to be able to help you figure out the information that you need. And then some schools do track interest. and use it in admission decisions. So if you have a student who is really interested in a school, maybe listening to a webinar, being able to talk to an admission counselor, get some specific information. This is all normally information that is kind of tracked, and so being able to show interest can matter, especially for highly selective schools. There are certain processes that you'll want to go through with that. So transcripts. I can tell a lot about a student based off of their transcript. I can tell their favorite class, I can tell their least favorite class. I can tell when maybe there was a bad semester or something else was going on kind of within their life. But there are certain things that colleges kind of overall are looking for when we look at a transcript. So one is rigor. What classes and courses did they take? Did they take any honors or AP courses or elevated courses to be able to kind of see like, okay, I'm ready for that next step? Doesn't mean that it's all those elevated courses, but it means that we want to see that they've pushed themselves in some way. Grade trend. So did they start off really strong in high school, stay really strong throughout high school, pretty flat grade trend, we would say. Did they start, maybe had a kind of rough transition getting to high school, but they're on the up and up, and we can see each year they're going up. That's an upward grade trend is what we would refer to that. Did they maybe start really well in their freshman year and then things have kind of trickled off throughout high school? That was what we would consider a downward grade trend. These are all things that colleges are looking at. We're looking at that cumulative viewpoint of your students' academic work. So I'll give some examples of where in the application to address some of these, especially if maybe that downward grade trend is where your student is at. And then core courses. I love an elective. And what high schooler doesn't love an elective? But colleges don't really love electives. So we are looking at the core courses a lot of the time, where your math, your sciences, your English, your social studies, right? What are those core courses? Then how will that translate to your potential success at the university? So what a lot of us will do is kind of ignore the electives in different ways, especially if the student is potentially like on the cusp, right? How are they doing in those core courses? They do matter as a part of it. So for grade trend, like I said, we notice when there are off semesters or classes. I always think, and my colleagues and peers in the world believe that if a student is able to address that in their application, that does show a level of maturity and kind of self-awareness of saying, hey, I recognize that this semester is going to stand out on my application, and here's what was going on. It often saves the student a phone call and or potentially a chance, right, of being admitted to that school. So the more honest and open a student can be in the application process definitely helps. And then it can play into admission decisions for specific programs. So if they are applying, for example, to a computer science program, right, and they're applying directly to that, we're probably going to be looking pretty hard at their math and their science courses as they were in high school. So if they're applying to that, but math was kind of always their lowest grade, we're going to want to know why they want to go into computer science, right, because there's a lot of math. So those are some things to kind of think about. Nursing is another really big one in that core courses, math and sciences and English writing, very, very important. Alrighty, so some application specifics, optional sections. So one is the additional information section. This is a great spot for if it is that grade kind of issue that I was talking about. Use the additional information section. That is a chance for you to kind of add something extra as a part of it. You don't need to use it if you don't need to. So also don't feel like you have to make something up to make it more dramatic in the college application process. A big one is community disruption. This has, in the last few years, been used as a space designed to talk about COVID and how that's potentially impacted students' academic work. So illness, natural disasters, though, it can kind of be anything that was a disruption within their community that impacted their academic success while in high school. So those are kind of the two sections. You should never repeat, right? So one should be for one information, one should be for another. You don't need to tell us twice. And then the biggest one is that it should not repeat what is in the essay, because we're reading kind of everything that a student submits to us. And if we're just reading the same information again, it's not using those sections well on the student's part, but also not telling us anything new that might help the student or help our admission decision. Affirmative action. So the recent Supreme Court cases are very much in the news, and let me start by saying I am not a lawyer for colleges or for education. I am a mere admission counselor who is also trying to figure this out along the way. So this information that I'll be sharing kind of in this next slide is all from the Department of Justice, and also from a website called NACAC, N-A-C-A-C, which is the National Association for College Admission Counseling. It's kind of our ethics guide board in my profession, but also has a lot of really great resources if you want to dive deeper into what and how affirmative action is changing within our country. But it varies by school. So one of the biggest things is that Common App will allow colleges to hide this self-disclosed race and ethnicity data. So that's not required data that your student is going to be filling out on the Common Application, and there's going to be probably a lot of colleges that will be hiding that information from the data being brought in for a reason that I'll tell you in the next slide. But a lot of schools are still figuring out what is in compliance and what's not. So every lawyer at every college is working kind of overtime right now to try to figure out what this means and how it plays into that college's admission decisions. So like I said, kind of diving in a little bit more, what does it mean? That's a great question. For some of us, it's not going to change anything. I'll use POU as an example. We do holistic admission. So for us, race is not a part of our admission decisions. So for us, it's not changing anything how myself or in training my counselors how to review, because it was not a part or a thing that we were like checking a box on as a part of our admission decision. And I would say for a majority of colleges in the US, that is the case. It's not really going to be changing anything as a part of their admission decisions or admission review process. For others though, it's going to totally change how they review every single application that is coming into their university. The biggest one is that admission cannot be determined solely on race or have race be one of the factors of admission. So it's like an admission counselor would be reviewing. It can't be any sort of line or box that an admission counselor is filling in that is impacting the decision for admission for that student. But one of the questions they've been getting a lot is like, okay, well, how is this going to be considered within the admission kind of process? It does not change that a student can talk about how race has impacted their lived experience in high school or beyond. And it also allows colleges to still read that and take that into accountability of how it may be showing how different character building things or how it has impacted their life in high school. Those are still things that can be taken into consideration because they're viewing it more as character, not as specifically race check the box. So again, that's my very simplistic answer for what is going on with affirmative action in this country. But again, if you are somebody who really likes to dive into it, NACAC has a really great resource, and the Department of Justice came out just in the middle of August with a really nice Q&A that I think is nice for parents to be able to read as well. So the recommendation, and this is where some things are changing on the college side, or you're going to maybe see things more and more that you haven't heard before. So one is just recommendations in general. Pay attention to the specifics, how many and who should be writing that letter. The recommendation is oftentimes the spot where I see a lot of students getting held up in completing their application. Now naturally, right, that makes sense because normally it means it's somebody else writing the application, right, a counselor, a teacher. And so it's dependent on somebody else doing that work. So the earlier you can ask somebody to write a letter of recommendation, the better. And also recognize that it's one person writing potentially hundreds of letters of recommendation each year. So give a little bit of grace and definitely give a little bit of time to whoever your student is asking to write that. And then the new one is recommendation optional. So this is, for example, what POU is doing this year because we were seeing that this was our biggest thing holding up completing applications, and it wasn't actually changing a lot in our decision making for students. So If your student doesn't want to, or they see that like, oh, I forgot to ask this teacher until really late, I might just apply recommendation optional to the schools that are allowing those as well. So just know that is an option for your students this year, and it's going to become a little bit more popular, I would suspect, in the next few years in the college admission landscape. The last one, kind of in that treat, is testing. So Common App came out with some new verbiage this year. And Common App kind of dictates what every other college application does, so it's the one I stick with the most. And so your students will see a few different options as they're looking at applying to colleges. So these are the ones that are coming off of the Common App application. One is always required. That means that the college is always going to require it for admission and for most likely scholarship decisioning. So has to be turned in. They have no other option except for to turn in the test scores. Sometimes required is what I would now consider the like test optional, what was previously test optional. Like, maybe they could turn it in, maybe they couldn't. Each school gets to kind of decide if it's sometimes required. That's oftentimes where if, we'll use computer science again as an example, maybe for admission to the university it's not required, but this special program is going to require them to turn in the test scores. So each school will tell you, here's exactly who would need and why you would need to send test scores into that university. So sometimes required means sometimes required. And a little wishy-washy, I admit. Never required means that it's never required for admission or for scholarship decision. So it's not going to hold up anything or negatively impact your student in any way to not send those test scores in with their application. Flexible means, again, sometimes if they want to send it, sure. If not, it's not ever going to be required, but they can send it if they want to, if they don't want to. And then ignored means that even if a student sends the test scores, they are not going to be considered in any way, shape, or form. And most likely that college is not even pulling them into their system. They're just pretending they're not there. So each college on the Common App will also tell you what they're going to be doing. Students can also filter their college search by this area. So by who and what they're requiring in the test score realm. And then super score or not, another big one is the student has taken multiple tests or taken like the SAT twice. A lot of schools will super score, so they're going to take the highest reading and the highest math and create a new score for that student to benefit them in the process. So again, my caveat for everything, check each college because all of us do it a little bit differently. And so some will super score, some will not, and we'll only look at their most recent test date or their first test date. And then finally, something for you all on kind of different ways to support your students through this process. You all are a vital part of the college application process and college choice process. So email is the primary way that colleges are going to communicate with your students. So if you're ever wondering like, hey, have you heard from this school? And they're like, well, I don't know. Check their email, right? And it's the email that they put on the Common application. You would not believe how many questions I get or calls we get to our office being like, I haven't gotten an email. We're like, okay, well, did you check your email? And they're like, well, which one did I put? I'm like, okay, this is the one that we sent it to. Here's this information. So make sure they know what email they're putting down on the Common App and also that they're checking it regularly. The other big thing is the majority of us colleges will now release our college decisions via email to be able to check their portal or a way for them to log into a system. So make sure that they're checking those. There are a lot of parent newsletters, which are really great to keep you all up to date on deadlines and things that are happening. But also visits or different events that might be specifically designed for parents. So definitely sign up for parent newsletters for each school. And then my biggest piece of advice, Mike, my colleague, will talk about financial aid, but keep them involved in the financial aid process. This is their also first biggest financial decision as a student and as a person. So being able to have them involved to where they're getting to that fall semester and not being confused by the bill that they're going to be getting to their email, because it will go to them as the student, is really important. So keep them involved in that financial aid process so that success just all around for you and a family. But yeah, otherwise, if you have questions, I'll be here at the end and you can feel free to ask. Thanks so much.
Now Ms. Wilson's going to talk to you about the application steps from our side and what your students can be doing in schooling.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Lynn, for that. So I'll be redirecting back to a lot of what she said, but for relevant purposes, here's where your senior should be. So right now, they should have or completed their senior questionnaire. They should have that application plan completed and ready to go. And they should have their Common App account set up and have it linked with school links. Okay, we're gonna go through each of these steps in detail, but if your senior is on target, they should be right here, okay? This is the sweet spot, all right? Okay, so senior questionnaire. So we talked a lot about this in the Rising Senior meeting, and we impressed upon them several times during junior meetings, and so they should have been working on this over the summer. This senior questionnaire is what the counselor will use to help write their letter of recommendation. So this is just going to give us a little bit more detailed information about things they've been working on over the last 4 years, highlight any information they want us to talk about in their letter in particular, and just help us have that whole view of who they are and what they've been doing over the last 4 years so that we can actually have some nice meat to the letter, okay? So it's their responsibility to have this completed. I know a couple of students had a little bit of issue with this initially, so I always tell students when they're completing this, it's not a bad idea to save it so you have it somewhere in case it accidentally deletes so that you can pull it up and provide that to your counselor because we need this information, okay? So that's the senior questionnaire. All right, and then this is the application plan. So they are going to complete this with their list of schools. There is room for 9 schools on this. So if they have more than 9 schools that they are applying to, they're going to complete an additional form. So like I had my first senior meeting today with a senior. I had 3 forms. Yeah, count that up. Yeah. Okay, so 9 schools per form, right? But that's what that student wants to do. They want to have nice fillers out there. They have a lot of schools that they're passionate about and interest. They have the grades and the criteria to do that, so we're supporting them in that, all right? They're the ones who have to do the work and fill out all those applications. You guys are the ones who have to pay for those application fees, but you see where we're going, okay? So they're gonna have that completed in order of the schools they're applying to. There is a box for them to select whether this is a reach school, a maybe school, or a safety school for them. Okay, we encourage students to have a couple of reach schools, all right? These are schools that, just based on paper, you're right there maybe in the pocket GPA-wise, right? But you know that this school has a very high admission, or a very low admission rate, right? They are very selective, but you still want to apply and see if you get in. That's great, okay? You're gonna have a couple of those, but you're also gonna know realistically it might be difficult to get in. And then you're gonna have a couple of safe schools that you know just based on paper and rating statistics, that you have a pretty good chance of getting in there. And that if you got in, you would be happy to go there. And then you might have a couple of maybe schools that you might be still on the fence about, or they have a free application and you want to apply and just see what happens, okay? So if a student is doing that, they're gonna have a couple of those in each of those categories. And then we also encourage them to have at least 1 in-state school. So regardless of plans, you never know what life will happen, what might happen next year, and so in case they need to stay home, they have 1 kind of safety school in state, okay? Then they're gonna list how they plan to apply, whether that is an early application, a regular decision, restricted early application, or an early decision application, okay? And you can find lots of information about what those deadlines mean. Each school will have that clearly outlined what they offer. Not all schools have every deadline, okay? Students are gonna decide how they plan to apply. A lot of your students will be applying early action, okay? So that is an earlier deadline than the regular decision deadline. And so for most schools, that's gonna be November 1st, okay? There are a couple schools out there that have October 15th deadline that we are working towards right now, okay? So make sure your student knows their deadlines, knows what they're working towards. And then they're gonna mark if it's a Common App school or if they're applying directly, or if it's a UC application, okay? There are a variable ways that students are going to apply, but most students will have a Common App school. And then they are going to put down number of essays for that school, letters of rec required for that school, how they plan to send test scores if they are or if they're optional. And then that last box is the required CCS form. This is a form that some schools will encourage students to complete in addition to the FAFSA. So it's like their own internal financial review, okay? So seniors need to come with this completed in order to schedule their senior meeting, all right? So for us to meet with your senior, this needs to be complete, the senior questionnaire, and then the last step is linking their Common App with the Schoollinks. So Schoollinks, if you remember correctly, is our new college application tool. So we've replaced Naviance and now it's all on Schoollinks. Students have their account set up already. They can just log on with their My Bellarmine email and they can follow the steps. And so it seamlessly, as we've seen so far, matches with their Common App. And they're able to do the FERPA, do the fee waiver if they have one, and then link their account. So that everything we do in Schoollinks for them, letters of rec, transcripts, will match up to what they're doing in the Common App. Okay? All right, so just a quick reminder. So please have your senior schedule their senior meeting. We are asking that they schedule that meeting at least 1 month prior to their earliest deadline. So if your senior has a November 1st deadline, they need to be in seeing us by October 1st, okay? We are trying to write letters and complete applications for all seniors right now. So it's helpful for us to have time to be able to do that, request letters from teachers. Teachers have time to write those letters so that we can meet that deadline. So we ask for at least a month in advance for that, okay?
I know you mentioned like these, let's say October 15th deadline.
Yeah.
Do the letters of recommendation need to be in at the same time as that application?
Yes. So seniors can start working on applications now. They don't need to wait for us in order to complete their application, but we do try to meet those deadlines. So we like to have letters, transcripts, and all that by that October 15th deadline. Yes.
It says that at your meeting, remind your senior, are the parents supposed to be at the meeting too, or just the student?
No, just the student, okay? I've had parents attend those, you're welcome to, but they are usually during mornings, lunches, and after school. But that is a senior meeting. They can attend that on their own. Okay. So yeah, like I said, those are the slots for those. We are trying to get all seniors in now. We've started scheduling those meetings this week. Seniors have been given the information last week of how to do these steps. And they've also been encouraged to start adding colleges to their Schoollinks, matching those, and starting to apply. When they meet with us, we are just confirming those schools, making sure that we are recommending the correct teachers and that those are appropriate selections, making sure their school list is appropriate for them, and making sure we know what deadlines we're meeting during that meeting. Okay?
Do you provide suggestions when you see a list of schools that you see might be, is not on the list?
Yeah.
You see to work with them?
Yeah, sometimes students come in and they're pretty firm on where they want to apply. They have a concrete list. A lot of times students will come in, they're still not sure. Or they might have a couple of schools that they still want to add, but they want some suggestions. We're happy to have those conversations with them. That conversation is usually kind of like, where do you want to go, where your potential majors are, and we can kind of help narrow them down and give them a couple more suggestions to add to the list, or go research themselves and then let us know if they're going to add those schools. Okay, and so overall, regardless of deadlines for Bellarmine purposes, we encourage students to have all their applications done by November 30th. Okay, so that is regardless of a regular decision deadline that you might see online. A lot of schools have later deadlines like January 2nd, February 1st, December 12th, what have you, okay? But we encourage students to apply earlier because we know in our experience, the sooner they have it in, the better. They'll hear back sooner, get those results, and we like to have everything complete and submitted before we go on Christmas break, so there's no surprises or uh-ohs, okay? So if everyone is applying and done by November 30th, we all go on break knowing that applications are done. will come back from winter break and then start hearing back from schools. And then they can start kind of seeing where their admissions are coming from and start making plans that way before they have to make a decision by May 1st.
I have a quick question. For the official transcript, so it doesn't count their senior year?
No, so transcripts that seniors are sending right now for college application purposes only have their grades up through junior year. And then it has their senior schedule.
I'm sorry, would you mind repeating the question they asked?
Yeah, so the question was asked for official transcripts. Colleges are only getting their junior year grades and then their senior year schedule.
So their cumulative GPA is not going to be counted?
It's based off of the first 3 years, so freshman, sophomore, junior year. Yes. Huh? Yes. And so a lot of colleges will ask for a mid-year. A lot of colleges will ask for a mid-year transcript. Most of your Common App schools will require it. And so that is after the end of first semester, we will send an additional transcript. That's a mid-year transcript. So that will have their first semester senior grades on it.
And that's February.
Say again?
That's in February?
Yes. That goes out, yeah, if they're ready, they go out in February, yes. And then schools will make decisions, and then if they select that school, the school will want a final transcript. So then we send a final transcript at the end of the year showing them what their end of the year senior grades are. Yes?
How are transfer students handled as far as who have another school for 2 years?
Yeah.
Freshman, sophomore year and then get a junior year here?
Yeah, in terms of transcripts?
Yeah.
Yeah, so their transcripts are going to show where they had their first 2 years or wherever they were at previously. Usually those are just in terms of like passing. And then they'll have their Bellarmine transcript will show their grades.
And we send their original.
And then we send the original transcripts from the previous school as well.
Because the irony is she had like 2 classes that repeated. Wasn't that, I mean, like in US history or something of that nature? Will that be weighted down or up, you think?
If they repeated a class, will it be weighted up or down?
Yeah.
So if a student took the same course, like, that's up to the college to decide how they want to weight that. So each college might weight courses, they'll do it on their own. Each college has their own internal weighting system.
Okay.
So they'll determine how they want to weight that course for your student. Oh gosh, okay, let's hold, can we hold questions till the end? Sorry, just we want to make sure we're moving forward and getting to all the materials.
Okay, so we will have time for questions at the end. So if any of this is unclear, we'll be able to answer any questions. And then again, we are recording this, so you'll be able to listen back to for your own benefit. All right, Mrs. Keene.
Good evening, I'm Heidi Keene. Okay, so we have shared with you a little bit about how the testing landscape has changed, particularly since COVID, although it's been progressively changing. But we want to remind you all that with so many test optional schools and test blind schools, if your student did not test, there's possibly going to be no problems submitting applications. Because over 2,000 schools, according to fairtest.org, have decided to lean that way and continue their policies of test optional or test blind. So you'll see a huge number across the United States. Washington, New York, California, all, for example, have elected to be statewide test-free or optional. So even some of the more Ivies, some of the more prestigious colleges as well, state schools, and you can read on into the list. Please see fairtest.org though to check specifically for the school that your student is looking at applying to see if they need to submit the scores. And when they do say optional, it is true. According to our Common App that we're using for most of our applications that our student will do and submit, they've reported data from this previous year. As reported before, we had a huge number of students that submitted scores before. The In 2019, it was 78%, but it has drastically gone down, and now it seems to be leveled out. So again, for the second year in a row, it's like 43% that will submit their test scores. And of those that submit, it appears that about half of them are accepted just the same. Does that make sense? Did I say that right? Okay. So it's kind of a 50-50, even if they submit scores or they don't. You can look at the common data sets for each college as well to confirm what an average score looked like that was submitted to that particular college and was accepted. So when you are considering whether or not to submit scores, we have lots of data out there through the common data set. We previously used Naviance, but now we're using School Links. You can see what that school will generally accept, what scores those students have. And so from that point, you can determine whether your son or daughter is at that range or if they're below. If it's a test optional school, use your conventional wisdom. Like, you probably don't want to submit something that's really low because their GPA stands out stronger. They're a great student otherwise, and maybe they don't test well. So we encourage you or your student not to submit a score at that point. Yes?
Have you noticed that the test scores are actually getting higher because people are scoring lower on the test scores, so now the average is much higher?
That is what the data is showing. Of those that submit, of course, it seems to be skewed higher because you're not going to submit a really low score, right? So yeah, use your discernment. We can help your student also process through that and try to help them discern as well. In case they want to give it a go, their schools want to do testing. Their school wants a test score. You have one more opportunity for College Board's SAT coming up here. We're going to do an in-school test date, October 11th. There will be a sign-up form on like a Google Sheet that will be supplied through my Bellarmine, and they'll probably put that also in your news email. That's going to come from Mr. Salazar. He's going to head up our SAT in-school test day.
Are you also doing ACT?
No, we are not hosting the ACT in school, but there is still a test date coming up that if they want to jump on that bandwagon. The important thing to emphasize, though, is that test scores need to be supplied with the application. And so, if they're going to be considered, right? And so, if they go too far into November test dates, they're not going to have a score to submit in time. So it would need to happen relatively soon. Our October test date scores should be available by November 6th. And we'll help with that whole process, explaining to the student what to do. Also to remind them that it's their responsibility to submit test scores if that's their choice. So they can go on to collegeboard.org or act.org, and you can ask that the scores be sent to the schools that you want them to go to. They don't have to send them to all of the schools on your list. You can specify which scores, you can super score, and you can direct them to your specific university. Okay, so we often hear at the test, because when we proctor the test, we'll tell students that they can submit test scores for free. College Board will allow the students to choose 4 schools at the time of their test date, if they want to indicate that. And I often just feel like I would say no to that. It's $12 typically to submit a test score to a college. It's not a big price to pay, but I feel like it's a good idea to get a feel for what the score is before you just automatically send it out. Okay, if that's price is too much for you at this time, let's say you have the student that's applying to 10 colleges or whatever the case may be, you may apply for a fee waiver. And that will also be something that can go over and help you with the college admission process as well. Some schools are free anyway, like PLU. So you can elect for that or talk to a counselor. One of us will help your student get to the fee waiver if needed. We don't want you to not apply for any reason or not send a test score for any reason. Okay. So signups are coming. Okay, Mr. Scotty, is everything?
So I'm going to blitz through this as much as I can because Mike is going to talk to you guys about scholarships. If you have specific questions about this, you guys know how to find me, right? Okay. So basically, scholarships, there are lots of different ways to get scholarships. What I'm talking about tonight, and Mike's going to cover the other piece of this, the internal scholarships that schools do and some other options for financial aid. I'm going to talk about just scholarships in general, okay? So there's lots of different ways that your student can get a scholarship. They can get it through merit, right? That's the GPA-based scholarships. Through their college major, sometimes there's major-specific scholarships. If you have a student that's like into a really niche major, sometimes that can be the case. Their volunteer service, that's things like what used to be the United Way, Varsity Letter. They now have other different scholarships that are based on your student service hours. Whether they live in a certain region of the country, there might be a scholarship. So for example, an alumni club when I was in school, I got an alumni club scholarship from the Seattle area for my university. Different art majors, theater scholarships, if they're a really talented musician, all these sorts of things, there's different ways. And obviously sports scholarships, and that's a big thing that a lot of our students here at Bellarmine might get scholarships for in the spring. So these are all possibilities. I think I told the story last year about like left-handed scholarships or Pekingese leather scholarships. There's so many weird ones out there. But they just, if you are looking, you can stack a lot of these strange ones together and pay, I mean, every little bit helps, right? So you might get $500 here, $1,000 there. If your kid's willing to put in the time and you're willing to put in the time, it's worth digging into. So how do you find those? From about 80% of these scholarships come from universities. So they're going to be specific to the university that they're actually going to attend. Schoolings also has a scholarship fee. So if you have your student go on Schoolings, they'll be able to see all these running scholarships. It's a little bit different than Naviance in that I can't put in individual like scholarships on there. I'm still working out the kinks on how to do that, but I probably will be sending out emails to students saying, here's these scholarships that are available this month, okay? So I'm going to try and get on top of that to make sure that they are getting anything that I hear about, they hear about. There's these websites that are clearinghouses, FastWeb, Washboard.org, and Going Merry. Those are great resources for finding general scholarships in the country that are going on. Not necessarily the most local ones. Washboard is local though, so that's helpful. And then also professional and social organizations, things like Rotary, Kiwanis. Those scholarships are great resources for students, and the Elks Club, and we will tell your students about those. Those typically come out in the spring though. Your place of employment might have a scholarship for somebody, like say you work at Boeing, or you work at BCU, or I'm trying to think of another example. If you work at a university, sometimes they have scholarships, or they might have price breaks for your kids, or price break exchanges, which is even better. That's right, that's why we all work there, right? And then credit unions. So your credit union, typically like TAPCO or PCU or Sound Credit Union, they have scholarships. So look into that. Maybe you should join credit union just to get that, right? It's incentive right there. We already said this, but I want to reiterate it. We strongly encourage our students to apply to one in-state school. You never know what can happen between now and spring, just as a fallback for the money, right? But if your student is dead set on getting away from you and they want to go to college out of state, we have plans for that. There is something called the WUI. It doesn't have to be sad, except for the leading part. The WUI is the Western Undergraduate Exchange, and there is a website where you can look at all the schools that participate in WUI. And what that means is that your student can get 150% of in-state tuition at these schools that participate in this, and it's all of these states that participate, okay? It doesn't mean that all the schools that are in these states participate, but it does mean that they have schools from these states that participate. I always like to use Boise State as an example, but remember, it's just 150% of the tuition, and then they tax on the room for it. So we have a lot, yeah, there's always a catch, right? We have a lot of students that get the Louis every year, and it is a great deal. So usually they have pretty cut and dry guidelines on how you get one, so you can read on their financial aid website exactly what your student needs to have to qualify for that. So you'll know ahead of time before they even apply. Are they gonna make the cut or are they not? So definitely look at this. You can see the website right there. And again, we're taping this, so sorry, I'm old. We're taping this. We're recording this. So you can watch this back if you need to catch these websites, and the slides will be provided for you as well. But you can see how the price breakdown works. I'm going to pass it to Chris. He's going to talk to you about NCAA information for all of you that have athletes.
Well, speaking of sports, I hope there's no Cougar Husky fans in here. How about the UC Boulder football team? I mean, unbelievable. That's just really got me thinking about NCAA. So basically, students now, they've been coming to us if they're wanting to play, and if they want their transcript to go out, they have to make sure that they sign a form before we send them out. So on that, with the NCAA Eligibility Center, that's still open for students. If students are interested, I think it's a good idea to sign up for that. That way they can track, transcripts, and coaches can actually contact them. There's a great website called Next Student College Athlete, NSCA Sports. So it's nscasports.org. So this is a wealth of information. I use it, and it's free. Part of it's free. You can actually sign up for and use it for to help your student, contact coaches or coaches contact them. But it's just a valuable resource to use. As far as the eligibility of athletes for D1, if students are already looking to go D1, they should have at least 10 core credits completed before. The core GPA is obviously, it says here 2.3 and 2.2. I should actually add with the Eligibility Center that that we want to make sure that that we do have the requirements already set. We don't really worry about Bellarmine student athletes because to graduate here it's 26 credits. We usually have those fulfilled. We do have to just kind of be concerned. There are some colleges that require 3 years of world languages, and so if that's something they need to take care of, they can always talk to us. And just to explain, I have tons of students that have gone through in the last 3 years that are thinking about it, anywhere from students, and you probably know, getting scholarships, lacrosse. We have a student one of my students is looking to play a D1 volleyball. So even though students are seniors, I want to add that things kind of happen pretty quickly. A couple years ago, there was a student that did not want to play soccer. He came back to me, Mr. Scotty, guess what? A coach called me up, I'm going to go play. So these things happen quickly. So just if students are really interested in playing and going to that next level, have them come and share, what they've been involved in. It's never too late. I just want to give an example of it. We always talk about NCAA. NAIA, there's quite a few schools around the country, over 200, that participate in this league. And I just wanted to share one of our conferences close to Washington, Oregon. I think it's Idaho, Montana, and British Columbia. So there's 16 schools that compete in this league. So if you're interested, feel free to visit that. If your student is interested in playing, maybe they're looking for a smaller school or even a local school. These are the colleges around. As you can see, they're all within these 5 areas. I think the BC school is, I know this one. Where is it? Not University. There's another one.
UBC.
You must be UBC, yeah. I guess I'm thinking of Simon Fraser, and that's Division 2, by the way. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Frechette. I'm the Dean of Student Financial Services at PLU. And before I get started, just want to go over what we'll cover here. So we're going to talk about what financial aid is, how to apply for financial aid, the types of financial aid that are available, how eligibility is determined, and how to compare offers and next steps. So who here has done a FAFSA before? Okay, so a lot of people. It's all about to change. So there are really big significant changes coming to the application process for 24-25. And I will say at the outset that we don't know everything that's coming yet. So I will do my best to present the changes that we've been told are coming, and I'll do my best to answer questions. But there may be some questions that I can't answer, and we'll have to wait for that information to be released by the Department of Education. So so I've highlighted and read throughout the presentation the changes that we know are coming, so I can draw your attention to those and make sure you're aware of those going forward as you go through the admission and financial aid process this year. So what is financial aid? This isn't changing, thankfully. The types of financial aid are largely remaining the same. So there are two types of financial aid. There's gift aid, which is free money. This is the best type of financial aid, obviously, because you don't have to pay any of it back, right? So it often comes in the form of scholarships. These tend to be merit-based, talent-based, what Mrs. Irving was saying before, and I'll talk a little bit more about scholarships in a few minutes. And then there are grants, which often are need-based forms of financial aid, which is what you fill out the FAFSA for, okay? And the other form of financial aid is what financial aid administrators call self-help. So this is either money that you borrow that has to be paid back, and students and parents can borrow. There are student and parent loans. And then there's work, money that students can earn while they live and study on campus, okay? So how do you apply? If you're a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, you will fill out the free application for federal student aid, okay? Otherwise known as the FAFSA. If you're a Washington State resident who does not qualify to fill out the FAFSA or to receive federal financial aid, this is mostly undocumented students and families, they would fill out the Washington application for state financial aid, or the WASFA, okay? One important thing to note is that the FAFSA for, I don't know, the last 5 or 10 years now has been available for families to fill out starting October 1st, okay? The Department of Education, because they are rebuilding the FAFSA application process right now due to legislation that was passed over the last few years, the FAFSA for 24-25 is not going to be available until sometime in December, is what they're telling us, okay? So that doesn't change the deadlines for applying to colleges and the other deadlines that are set here at Bellarmine, but for those of you who need to know what the need-based financial aid offer is before you make a decision, you know, the need-based financial aid offers might be coming out a little bit later than normal for 24-25. So at PLU, I mean, we typically start rolling out need-based financial aid awards sometime in mid-December. We probably won't start doing that, you know, this year until sometime in mid-February at the earliest, okay? So it just might change your decision-making, the timeline of your decision-making process a little bit. But nobody's anticipating that this will take so long that people won't be able to make decisions by the May 1st, you know, priority date, the college decision deadline. So, all right. So the first thing to do when you're applying, and you can do this part now, okay, so there's been no delay in this, is you need to create an FSA ID, and there's the website, and both the student and the parent need to create an FSA ID and a password. This is what allows you to log into the FAFSA, create an account, and electronically sign the FAFSA, okay? So students and parents will need their social security number and a mobile phone number or email address to create this, okay? And the one thing that's changing, and I don't know if this impacts anybody in the room, but parents who don't have social security numbers, they're now going to be expected to apply for FSA IDs as well and sign the FAFSA electronically. If they don't have a social security number, what we're told is there's going to be some kind of knowledge-based match that they're going to have to go through in order to receive this. So what that means, we're not sure yet, but there will be a way for everybody to create an FSA ID and password and electronically sign the FAFSA going forward, okay? And for the WAFSFA, we're told it's still a fairly simple process where the families just create an account and then go ahead and fill out the application on that particular website that's on the slide there, okay? Okay, so when is parent info required? Most traditional age college students, are considered dependent students for the purposes of applying for financial aid, okay? So when they go through the application, students are asked a series of questions, right? And if they can't answer yes to any of the questions, then they're considered a dependent student, which means that the parent or parents have to provide their financial information on the FAFSA as well, okay? So they're generally looking at the student's age, whether or not they're married, do they have children they support, are they in the military, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so again, many traditional age college students, can't answer yes to these questions, so often, students, coming right out of high school are considered dependent students and need to provide parent information. Okay, who is considered the parent, all right? This is an important distinction. There's also a change with this that's coming for 24-25, and I'll make note of that here as well. So to be considered a parent, to put your information on the FAFSA, you have to be the legal or adoptive parent, okay? If parents live together but are not married, both parents are still included, okay? If parents are divorced and not living together, it's the parent who provides the most financial support, okay? And why this is important is because previous to 24-25, the parent who put their information on the FAFSA in cases of divorce or separation was always the parent with whom the student lived the most in the previous 12 calendar months, regardless of financial support. They've changed that now. Who the student lives with is irrelevant now, okay? It's the parent who provides the most financial support. And we just learned in the last couple of days, in cases where child support is being provided, it's the parent who provides the child support if that child support is equal to more than 50% of the financial support for the student, okay? If the parent is remarried and the student lives with parent and step-parent has to be included, okay? This is always how it's been. This is not changing, okay? I know for families in this situation, this can be frustrating sometimes, but step-parent information does have to be included if the parent is remarried. And if the student lives with a grandparent or another support person, do not include unless the student's been legally adopted, okay? So if the student is living with a grandparent under legal custody or legal guardianship, the grandparent's information is not included on the FAFSA, okay? Any questions about this? And I'll be here after too if people have, questions that they want to ask more privately, so. Okay. So submitting your application. So the entire FAFSA submission process is completely different now, okay? So it's going to be an invitation system. This is how the Department of Education is describing it. So it used to be you and your student sat down together and you completed one unified application and you both electronically signed it at the end. So now the student will sit down, they will complete and sign their portion of the application, okay? And they'll submit it. And then the parent, otherwise known as the contributor, okay, is going to receive an email letting you know it's time for you to submit your portion of the application now. So the application is being broken apart, okay, into two separate portions. So the big fear, you know, among schools and the Department of Education is that we're going to find a lot of partially completed FAFSAs this year. Students are going to submit it and they think it's done and that's going to be the end of it. So just know that it's not just the student submitting their portion. You also have to be on the lookout for the email that will tell you as the parent to log in and then do the parent portion of the application as well, okay? I have not seen a demonstration of the new FAFSA yet, so if you ask me specific questions about what this is going to look like or how this is going to feel, I have no idea. So, yeah. But that's how it's going to be structured, okay?
If you're using the post 9/11 though, veterans post 9/11, you still have to fill out the FAFSA?
So the question is, if you're using the post 9/11 bill, so if you're getting VA benefits, do you still have to fill out the FAFSA? The answer is no, you don't, but you could still receive federal grants on top of, you know, VA benefits in the post 9/11 GI Bill. So I would still go ahead and do it, yeah, okay? Yes?
How does the student get an invitation?
Well, the student doesn't get an invitation. They're the one who has to initiate this, okay, by going to the FAFSA website. It's the contributor, i.e. the parent, who then get the invitation. Yep.
When does it start?
Sometime in December, yeah. They refuse to give us an exact date right now, but legally, they have to release the FAFSA no later than January 1st, okay? So that would be the absolute latest that it would be released. Yes, sir? There is nothing you can fill out right now except, you know, create an FSA ID for yourself and the student so that you have that ready for when the time comes. Yes?
I've seen that since this isn't going to be available, a lot of schools are required to submit the CSS profile. Is that going to be largely different than before?
So I've done a little bit of, so the question was, since the FAFSA won't be available till later, will in schools, some schools that use the CSS profile might ask students to submit this sooner. Will that be different than the FAFSA, or will it, you know, generally follow the same news structure? I've done a little bit of digging on that. PLU is not a profile school, so we're not in touch with the College Board that closely to kind of know what changes are coming to the CSS profile. I haven't found anything out there that says that the CSS profile is changing significantly. They might alter the formula for eligibility a little bit so it more closely mirrors what the new FAFSA formula is going to be, but structurally and in terms of the application process itself, I haven't heard that it's going to be much different than it was in the past. So. Yeah, the federal and state aid can't be applied using the CSS profile. They can estimate for you, you know, a little bit what you might qualify for with federal and state aid based on the profile, but that's it. They can't actually officially award it to you until the FAFSA is submitted. Any other questions? Okay. All right, so providing income information. So this whole change is called FAFSA simplification because it's supposed to be easier for families to do this. And this is actually, once this is working correctly, this is actually going to be one of the things that, that should make it easier for families to apply, okay? So you will no longer manually enter any of your income information or household information on the FAFSA. And even the IRS data retrieval tool, for those of you who've done the FAFSA before, is going away. Instead, what it's being replaced with is called direct data exchange, okay? So when the student creates an account and logs into the FAFSA, the first thing they're going to be told they need to do is consent to having their tax information sent directly from the IRS to the schools that they're applying to. And parents will have to consent to the same thing as well when they do the parent portion of the FAFSA as well. If you don't consent to this, you're not eligible for federal financial aid. So unfortunately, there's really no choice. If you want financial aid, you have to consent to direct data exchange. And then all your income information will be sent directly to the schools that you're applying to, and you won't have to enter anything from your taxes or use the IRS data retrieval tool to interface with the IRS website or anything like that. Okay.
Is it still the prior year?
That's a great question. So the question was, is it still the prior year? So it's 2 years prior, because yeah, that's what it's been for the last 5 to 10 years. But yeah, so that's not changing. It's still going to be 2 years prior. So for 24-25, it's going to be based on 2022 income information. Okay. All right. Household size, and I think I have a slide on this, but in case I don't, I'm going to mention it now. You won't enter household size either. The family size will just be the number of exemptions that you have on your FAFSA. Okay? Excuse me, number of exemptions that you have on your tax return. All right? Okay, so providing asset information. This will probably be the only place where you will have to do a little bit of manual entry because asset information is not reflected on tax returns. So if you're in a situation of divorce or separation, child support received, it used to be reported as income for that tax year. It's now going to be listed as an asset on the FAFSA. Okay, so any child support received for that year will be listed as an asset. This is actually beneficial because assets are, they're regarded, they don't count as much towards your ability to contribute as income does. This is primarily an income-driven formula. Okay, that part's not changing. So being able to report child support received as an asset rather than income is a good thing for families. Another big change that's got people up in arms is that all business and farm owners must now report net value, okay, of their businesses or farms. All right, so it used to be that families that own family farms didn't have to report this, and small business owners with businesses with fewer than 100 employees didn't have to report net value either, okay? Now, anybody who owns a business or a farm, regardless of its size or classification, has to report the net value, okay? So what that means is I can tell you, financial aid administrators, I'm not going to know how to help you figure out what the net value of your business or farm is, okay? So this is one thing that you could probably get started on right now, even if you can't fill out the FAFSA right now. If anybody here is a business or farm owner, you can start figuring out now what the net value would be for that particular business or farm that you own by looking at your paperwork or talking to your tax accountant about how to do that. So, yeah, okay. And then education savings accounts only count as parental assets now if they're designated for the student on the FAFSA. So what that means is if you're filling out the FAFSA for your son, but you also have an education savings account for your daughter, you don't have to report the value of her account on your son's FAFSA anymore, okay? So that's also a good thing, all right? The business and farm, bad thing. Don't know why they're asking people, small business owners, to report the value of that, but yeah, but that's the situation we're faced with right now. Yes, sir?
Do you have to fill out a FAFSA?
You do not have to fill out a FAFSA if you're not applying for need-based financial aid.
That won't, are there any schools that you know of that it would affect a student's application process if they did not fill out a FAFSA?
If it impacts their scholarship eligibility in any way, then it's not truly just purely an academic scholarship or an athletic scholarship or whatnot. If they need the FAFSA to determine eligibility for scholarships, then it has some need-based component to it. But if the school is telling you no, you do not have to fill out a FAFSA to be considered for an academic scholarship, then you can take their word for that, okay? I can tell you at PLU, we have academic scholarships. We're gonna start admitting students in October and telling them what their academic scholarships are as early as October and November, because we truly don't look at financial need when determining merit scholarships for families, so. Yeah, but I know a lot of highly selective schools, they only do need-based financial aid. Okay, so in those cases, yes, they might be requiring that you submit the CSS profile, early so you can get an idea of what that need-based financial aid award might look like. So, yes, ma'am.
We had schools earlier that were telling us we didn't do this, we looked up by student or parent.
That's correct, yeah. So if you don't do the FAFSA, you can't apply for any federal student or parent loans. So if you're going to need to rely on any type of loan assistance, then yes, you'll need to do the FAFSA. Yes, ma'am.
So if you have a 529 account, you have to put that down.
As a parental asset, if the 529 is designated for the student whose FAFSA you're completing. Yeah.
Not if it's owned by a
Not if it's owned by a grandparent. That's the loophole. So the question was, if you have a 529 plan, you have to list that on the FAFSA, and the answer is yes. You have to list it as an asset in your name as the parent. Okay. This gentleman asked, but if the 529 plan is owned by the grandparent, do you have to list it? The answer is no. Do not. Okay. So yeah, that's a little bit of a loophole that people can get around. So, and I'm not a financial advisor, so I don't know how easy it is to move 529 plans out of your name into your own parents' name. So, yes.
And did I understand correctly that in the past, if you had multiple household members in college, that made a difference, but now it does not?
Yes, so I'm going to be getting to that in a couple of slides. So the question was, if you have multiple household members in college, does that make a difference anymore? The answer is no, but I'll talk about that in more detail in the upcoming slides. So, all right, so important dates and tips. December, this is when the new FAFSA and WAFSAs are going to become available. Make sure you're doing the right application, because when the 24-25 FAFSA is released, the 23-24 FAFSA is still going to be available to complete. I mean, there are still people, enrolling mid-year for the 23-24 academic year who still need to do the FAFSA for this year. So every year we get a handful of people who do the wrong year, and they're like baffled why they don't have a financial aid award yet. So make sure you're doing the right financial aid year. Don't forget to refile. You have to do a FAFSA every year if you want need-based financial aid. We're told this is the only year the FAFSA should be late. So for 25-26, we should be back to an October 1st filing date for families, and then never pay to complete your financial aid application because the FAFSA is free. That's the first word in FAFSA. So, okay, so what types of aid are available? So the primary federal grant program in the country is the federal Pell Grant. The maximum amount for this year is $7,395, okay? And then it scales down from there. There's also, for students who receive the Pell, there's also the Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant. And different schools have different funding levels for this particular award. So you could see anywhere from $100 to $4,000, depending on the school and how much funding they have in this grant, okay? And then there are also federal student loans, okay? So first-year students can borrow up to $5,500. Second-year students, $6,500, and then juniors and seniors can borrow $7,500 each year. The interest rates on those loans have been going up. They do change every July 1st, okay? So, yeah, that's just something to be aware of as, you start to approach the beginning of next academic year. Just make sure you're looking at the Department of Ed's website or the school's website to see, what the new interest rates on those loans are going to be. But typically they're all on deferment while the student's in school at least half time, and then for 6 months after they graduate. So they don't have to start paying them back until after they leave school. And then the other federal loan product is a federal nursing loan. This is specifically for students who are enrolled in nursing programs. And this has a fixed 5% interest rate. It's been like that forever. So, okay. Types of state aid. The state of Washington has one of the most generous grant programs in the entire country, okay? To receive it, you must be a Washington resident and enrolled in a school in the state of Washington, okay? So the Washington College Grant covers full tuition at Washington public universities, okay? And at private schools, it covers up to $9,739, okay? And again, that's on a sliding scale based on income and household size. So it's not all or nothing. There are prorated amounts until eventually people, are no longer eligible based on income, okay? There's also the Washington College Bound Scholarship, which students would have had to have signed up for this in middle school, but it's based on income as well. And at public universities, it gives them an additional $500 to use towards books and supplies. And at private schools, it's another $2,507 on top of that $9,739, okay? And then the state also has, sorry, that got cut off there. The state also has a work-study program as well. So yeah, if a student goes to school in state and the institution has state work-study funding, this is money that students can earn while they're living and studying on campus, and it gets paid to them like a regular paycheck, basically, so that they can use it for personal expenses, books and supplies that they need throughout the semester, things like that. All right, and then the other type of aid that's available is institutional aid. So for private schools, this is going to be where the majority of the financial aid comes from, okay, because the cost of attendance at private institutions is pretty high. So it can be merit-based or talent-based, okay? So I know at PLU our merit-based awards are just based on the admission application, okay? But make sure you're looking at the different schools that your student is applying to see if there are other application materials that need to be submitted in order to be considered for any type of merit award. For Division I and Division II schools, there are athletic scholarships. There are no sports scholarships for Division III schools in the NCAA, just so everybody's aware of that. And then as a church-affiliated school, I know we have, like at PLU, we have a matching scholarship. We match up to $1,000 for church scholarships. We have scholarships for confirmed Lutherans. So I'm just thinking if any of you are applying to, Catholic colleges and universities, those might be things that you want to ask those admission and financial aid offices about as well, to see if there are matching scholarships for church scholarships or, confirmation scholarships, things like that. So, like Mrs. Irving was saying, lots of different ways that institutions and organizations give out money. So make sure you're asking these questions. Okay. Let's see. Based on financial needs. So yeah, there's a lot of institutional aid as well that is need-based. Okay. So besides merit scholarships, schools often have their own need-based financial aid as well. This will often require the FAFSA or the WASFA or the CSS profile. But yeah, just make sure you're asking what types of scholarships are available and what is required to submit in order to be considered for them, okay? Admission offices are usually very transparent about the types of awards that they offer. I mean, they want you to get as much free money as possible, to make it as enticing as possible for your student to attend the institution. So the websites are a great resource and a great place to find information, okay? So speaking of need-based financial aid, how is financial need determined? So the formula is actually really simple, but there's complexity behind the formula, which I won't get into, but what it is, it's cost of attendance minus student aid index equals financial need. So it used to be expected family contribution, or EFC. So the EFC after this year is gone. It's now called the student aid index, okay? The formula has changed to determine eligibility, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But yes, instead of saying EFC, we all now have to start saying SAI. Let it roll off the tongue. SAI. Okay. So cost of attendance. This is not changing except for what they call room and board. Now it's called housing and food. So we're required to call it that, or else we get in trouble. So the cost of attendance is tuition and fees, and housing and food. So these are the direct costs. This is what gets charged by the institution on the student's billing, okay? But there are also other items that get included in the cost of attendance as well, like books and supplies, a transportation allowance to go back and forth from home during breaks, and an allowance for personal expenses as well. So these indirect costs, you don't get billed for these, okay? but they're part of the cost of attendance that we use to determine financial need, and they are actually real expenses that students will have throughout the course of their academic year, okay? So the student aid index, what's the student aid index? So it's still used prior income. So like I was saying before, it's still gonna be based on 22 years prior. So for the 24-25 FAFSA, it's gonna be based on 2022 income. The family size is no longer anything that you'll manually report. It's just going to be the number of exemptions on your tax return, okay? The number in college is no longer going to be a factor. So why the number in college was important was, let's say you had a household size of 2, okay, so there are 2 parents and 2 kids, and both kids were in college at the same time. So we would call that a 4-2 household in financial aid jargon, right? So what the FAFSA would do is it would look at all your income and your assets, and it would calculate an expected family contribution of, say, $30,000. Then what it would do is it would see you have 2 household members in college, and it would take the $30,000 and divide it by 2, so that the expected family contribution was $15,000 for each student, okay? So that's no longer going to be a factor anymore, okay? The formula is a bit more generous, so that instead of calculating a $30,000 contribution, it'll probably only calculate a $20,000 contribution now, because they are trying to protect more of people's income and assets in this new formula, but you won't receive the added benefit of having 2 in college at the same time, okay? So that is one thing, to make note of, is that the SAI formula is in general more generous. More people than previous years are going to qualify for the federal Pell Grant. But families who've had multiple children in college at the same time are going to lose eligibility, okay? And that's just an unfortunate reality of the new formula, okay? I can tell you at PLU, for our continuing students who have multiples in college right now, we are going to be, giving some of our own financial aid next year to replace any Pell Grant dollars that they lose, okay? So yeah, if any of you are in the situation right now where you have a child in college right now already, and your next one is coming up because they're a senior now at Bellarmine, yeah, you may want to ask the school where your other child is, how they're going to be, handling that for you, okay? And then, of course, the student aid index still looks at assets, just like the OVFC formula did, except you don't have to, at least on the FAFSA, you don't have to provide any information about your home equity in your primary residence or anything that's in a designated retirement account, okay? Any questions about the student aid index? Not that I can answer many questions beyond the information I just provided right now, but yeah, okay. All right, so one thing we tell families to pay really close attention to is what the net cost is actually going to be. Expected family contribution and student aid index, that's all they are. They're just index numbers to help us figure out what a family's financial need is and how much Pell Grant they might qualify for. What you really want to be looking at when you're comparing financial aid offers across schools is what the net cost is going to be. And you determine net cost by taking the direct cost of attendance, so what you're going to be charged on the bill, which is definitely tuition and fees, and if living on campus, housing and food, and then subtract from that the total scholarships and grants that the student is receiving. That's what your out-of-pocket cost is going to be. Whether you pay for it out of pocket or whether you borrow loans for it, that's what you're going to be on the hook for, okay? And there's no standardized way that schools present this information, okay? So you may have to, schools have gotten better about trying to illuminate for families what the net cost is, but this is really the number you want to be paying attention to, okay? Because this is where you're going to see who's more expensive, who's less expensive, okay? All right, so next steps, apply for admission, and then you'll start receiving offers for financial aid, but like I said, need-based financial aid awards, full financial aid packages, Expect them to be a little bit later than normal this year just because of the delay in the release of the FAFSA, okay? And then look for additional scholarship opportunities in the meantime. Mrs. Irving mentioned watchboard.org. I have that one up here as well. And then meet with your school or admission counselor for help comparing financial aid offers once you start receiving full financial aid awards in the mail, okay? I know our admission counselors at PLU are well-trained in financial aid. They know how to do that detective work to figure out what net cost is, not just looking at our own financial aid awards, but looking at other schools' financial aid awards as well. So yeah, make sure you're asking those important questions if there's anything about a financial aid award that is confusing to you, okay? That's it. Any other questions? Okay.
So we're all going to be up here. If you guys have questions for anybody regarding any of our slides tonight, and I just want to say a quick thank you to Hillary and Mike for coming out tonight and spending time with you to answer all of your questions. So if you have a question for your students council, we'll be here hanging around for a few minutes, but if you have questions for the group. Yes, so we had a question about school links and how parents can get into school links. You guys will have your own individual login. We are working with IT right now to batch load all of your parent emails into school links based on what email we have on file for you in Blackbaud, my Bellarmine, sorry. It's not Blackbaud, it's my Bellarmine. So we're going to batch load those in, and hopefully you'll have access in the next week or so. So look for that to come, but have patience with us because it's a lot of information to data upload. But in the meantime, you can always peek over your student's shoulder while they're logged in, and their email from Bellarmine and their Bellarmine password will get them in. So, thank you. Any other questions? Awesome. Great, thank you for coming.